Social Studies Community Interview Project with Jeff Jardine, Modesto Bee columnist by Adhi Balaji. Were used 100 years ago.
Well, the automobile had come in really right around the turn of the century. So after 1903, 05, automobiles started to show up here. And by that time, when you look at the pictures, you're going to see a lot of automobiles, but you still had lots of horses and lots of horse-drawn carriages and wagons. The train was here by then, and so that's the main things. There were some airplanes, but not a lot. They didn't have an airport yet. They did have fields where people had it, but 1915, the airport was on its way in. So.
What kind of farming tools were used to plow dirt 100 years ago?
Well, they were still using some of the horse-drawn combines, and what we're talking about is, sometimes 20 horses pulling a big, giant harvester. But at that point also, they were getting some gas and steam-driven harvesters and plows, and it was pretty primitive, but it still worked. Giant iron wheels on them. It was pretty impressive for the time.
What was the population 100 years ago?
Okay, I'm guessing, and this is an estimated guess, about 77,000 for the whole sound. And I'll tell you what, in 1910, there were 4,500 people in Modesto. By 1920, there was 9,200 people. So you could see it was a big growth. And that came with the railroad, and it came with people coming over here and doing more farming, and the town starting to grow and people wanting to live in the town. So I'm guessing right around, 65, 7,000, right around there at that time.
Did schools have playgrounds 100 years ago?
They were building, because the town was growing, they were building these very nice new schools. And yeah, they had playgrounds. They may not have had all the playground equipment you're used to, but they had lawns and fields and ball fields and things like that. Yeah.
What kind of businesses were there 100 years ago?
100 years ago, it wasn't all that different than today. You had stores, you had lumber yards and building materials places, you had feedlots and feed stores, you had street dry cleaners, you had barbers, restaurants, bars and saloons. You had everything a town has, Modesto had. Theaters, hotels. It was the hotels really dominated the downtown of Modesto.
What kind of treatments did the hospital do to patients 100 years ago?
100 years ago, they could do some surgeries, and they had 4 hospitals in Modesto 100 years ago. A couple of them were newer, a couple of them were older, and then some eventually replaced the others. But it was obviously not as sophisticated as it was now, but if you had something happen, you could probably get a surgery and survive it.
Was Modesto a big city 100 years ago?
No, it was a very small town that was growing, and again growing because they had the railroad and because it was becoming a center. Now, did you know that in the 1800s and even into the 1900s, until they built LaGrange Dam for the irrigation district, you could take a riverboat all the way up the Tuolumne River to Empire, and so there was a steamboat trade on the river, and that was really interesting. You can go out and you can see some of the old piers out by the Shiloh area out there, Shiloh Road. There's a little trailer park there, and you can see the old piers from the docks from when the riverboats used to come up there.
Did farmers grow a lot of crops 100 years ago?
They didn't. They grew a lot of wheat, drylands wheat, because the irrigation districts were just forming and the canal system was still being built. So they used to have drylands wheat because it didn't require a lot of water. As the irrigation system expanded, they went more to tomatoes and fruits and vegetables and row crops. They started planting a lot of almond trees, a lot of apricot trees. Almonds have been around for a long time. Apricots, peaches, walnuts, more so than anything. In fact, one of the oldest trees in the county was out off of, I think it was Beckwith Road out there. I think it was 130 years old or something that they knew about. It's a walnut tree. So.
What kind of technology do they have 100 years ago?
Technology is something that is more by necessity. And agriculture was what drove the technology, because that's how people made their living. So most of it was in building better farm equipment. It was building this, making steam engines and gas engines work on the farm as compared to horses and buggies. They had state-of-the-art fire engines back then. They had, the train was a form of technology, and it just kept improving and improving. We had the big train station out here, and all of that is really based on people's needs, and so technology drives that.
What kind of food varieties did farmers grow 100 years ago?
100 years ago, they were growing fruits and vegetables and nuts, walnuts in particular, and some rice. But again, it was based upon the availability of water, what kind of crops they grew. So if there wasn't a lot of water, they probably grew wheat. If there was a lot of water available, there were places where they could get to the water, they were going to grow more like tomatoes and rice, because they could, rice takes a lot of water. It's grown in a paddy. So that's what they grew. But just about everything, asparagus, broccoli, you name it, every kind of vegetable they grow here, just like down at the farmers market.